Here on this '06 TDI, and one of the things that a lot of people will want to do on these is machine the rotors, and in all honesty, you're going to save what, $40, $50. The brakes last, I think I got 227,000 miles on the front brakes, and the rear brakes have over 100,000 miles. If you're using ceramic pads, which I highly recommend. I have two TDIs. I have one regular sedan 2006 and one 2009, and I went to the ceramic on the '09, and it's great. I would highly recommend it. They get no wheel dust, and the original, I don't know, they say was semi-metallic, but honestly I don't think it was. So after you go ahead and take the wheels off, you're going to want to take off your stars, these guys, off your rotors. So I've already done that. And then remove the caliper. And like I said, I would, I could probably machine these and they'd be underneath the machine specs. But let me put it this way. If they warp, okay, if you go ahead and do the brakes, and then let's say 2 years down the road, the rotors warp, what good did it do not to replace the rotors? And when you're getting that many miles out of a set, it's probably worth it to go ahead and just, spend the money. You're talking about, you got to machine them. So machining might cost you $15 a rotor. New ones are $38. Do the math. You're talking about $20 a wheel, maybe $80 for parts or something, maybe $100 at the most, and you have to wait for them to get machined, and your time and money going back and forth to go over there. If you figure about what you're going to spend to go wait for your rotors to get machined, you're going to go over there and drop them off, you can go back and pick them up, you spend a few more dollars on gas and your time, you might as well just buy new ones. You're almost in at the same amount. So if you're doing a DIY brake job, I would highly recommend new rotors. And like the rear ones were warped when I did them last time. I just threw pads in last time because I was kind of in a hurry, and this time I'm going to go ahead and replace everything and just put them all new like I did on my other car. And once I did that, my stopping power was great with the new ceramic brake pads, and the ones I got were from Parts Authority, which is a kind of I think they're West Coast mostly, and it's their house brand. So we'll put that on the video a little bit later, so stay tuned and check out how to do the brakes. It's pretty simple, and the only thing that's a little more difficult is the rear, to twist that caliper back in, and having the right tools always helps. On these here is to remove this little plug back behind here. I need a screwdriver, these little plugs here, and then pull the caliper off the front. I'm just going to show you how to remove and replace the front and the rear, one side, and that's how it goes. These are number 45 Torx. Go ahead and take that off. Take off your caliper. Alright, to get the caliper off, usually you want to make sure that you push your bolts back in. Sometimes they get stuck. See how it's sticking out the end there? And then do the both on both sides. And what I'll do is use a mini pry bar or screwdriver and just kind of pry the caliper over a little bit, just to get the brake shoes in just a little bit so it falls off. That way it can come right off. And on this here, you got this little clip. The earlier ones I don't think had this. And that goes back on the same way as it came off, just right there. You just put it in there, bend it, and then just snap it over into the hole. Make sure it's in there tight when you put it back together. Then to get this off, generally what I do is I take a screwdriver and shove it into this hole right here and pull up on that little tab. There's probably another way, like I think you can actually pinch this, but it doesn't work very good. So sometimes if you just put the screwdriver in the hole, push on the tab, it takes it off. Now's the fun part. It's really nice to have this tool. They sell these on Amazon, I think, I don't know, but I bought it a long time ago from a Mack truck. And with the pads in, the caliper, you have a choice right now. You can actually open up the bleeder and release all the old fluid as you turn it in, or you can just push it back up into the reservoir. Now, if you push it back up into the reservoir, so put a little bit of tension on there, let that sit. I'm going to go ahead and let this thing kind of hang from the brake line so you guys can see. So you can open up the bleeder and then push all the old, I usually put a tube on here and save the old fluid into somewhere so that it doesn't make a mess. And as you're pushing your caliper pin back in, or piston back in, you'll be pushing the old fluid out this thing here. Or you can push it back up into the reservoir. Now, the advantages and disadvantages. The advantages, if you push it back into the reservoir, you won't have to bleed the brakes. Okay? If you push it out this tube, you're going to get the old fluid out of your caliper, and you can put new clean fluid in your reservoir, but you will have to bleed the brakes when you're done. So, you know, if the quick, easy way is to go ahead and just push it back up into the caliper, or up into the reservoir, and just do it that way, which is what I'm going to do. Some guys will say, no, you got to take it and put it out the brush. You don't have to do it either way. But sometimes what happens is junk goes up, you know, your old fluid, especially, this has got 200,000 miles on it. It's 2006. It's 12 years old, 13 years old, 12 years old. And it'll push the fluid back up into the master, or sometimes it'll bring some dirt with it and cause a problem with your master cylinder, and your fluid could, contaminated old fluid can cause problems. You know, it's maybe about 1 or 2, 3% of the time that happens. So I'm going to go ahead and take a chance and just push it back together. It is better to remove it, really, but I don't have anybody to bleed the brakes with me, so I'm going to go ahead and do it that way. You can also use a C-clamp or a pair of giant vice grips to push the piston back in. But I like this tool because it does less damage. Sometimes you'll crack a piston. I don't know, on this model they're probably steel, but some of them are actually made out of like some sort of a composite material, and sometimes they chip and crack as you're trying to put them back in. So I like to use this little squeezer tool. It's really handy, nice to have. Notice that the old pads have shims on them, and what the shims are for is to actually minimize brake noise. So make sure that your new set that you get, your new set of pads, and you don't go with the ones that I go with, which are Posit Quiet. They have them at Parts Authority, and the Posit Quiet ones come with, you know, you can go to the dealer and buy the pads too. They probably might be a little bit, they might be better, but the Posit Quiet ones are actually really good. And these look like they have some metallic. It's like a semi-metallic composite, ceramic composite. That's what they look like to me. But they're not a real metallic pad, a heavy metallic. They're like a light metallic. So it's kind of weird. But I'm using the ceramic ones, and I've already ran these before once on my other car, and I'm really happy with them. You lose just a hair of braking power, but it's really not noticeable. I was able to really stop. I was in a real panic situation, and I was still able to really stop fast. These cars have amazing braking as it is, so losing a hair of it isn't going to make that much difference, and it's really such a minute amount. I don't think you could even measure it without some sort of like a actual test with I mean, it's milliseconds or something like that difference. So the next thing you want to take off is the caliper bracket, which is this bolt here and one below it, and then your rotor will just slide right off. So the big bolts are actually a 21 millimeter, but you can also use a 13/16 if you don't have it. In fact, they fit really good. The 13/16 does. I've always used a 13/16. I've never had a 21mm wrench in 35 years of working on cars. So, I'm not a professional mechanic anymore. I was many years ago. I actually retired from that, and never want to go back. But it's good to teach it to other people. All right, so once this is done, I'll have this brake rotor off. Probably have to hit it once with a hammer. They do tend to rust. This hub tends to rust on, and if it doesn't just pop right off, it's because you need to give it a little hit. So, nice dead blow hammer sometimes does it. There it is. So, I like dead blows because they don't make too much noise. So a lot of times I don't like to use air tools because of that. I have tons of air tools, but they make lots of noise, and people don't like that. So if you're at your house, doesn't take much longer if you use it by hand. So there you have it. Reassemble the same way. That's how you do the front. You might need to take your new pads and put them in here, and then push your caliper in all the way. Usually you have to do that. And like I said, I would replace all the rotors, just even if they're not bad. It's just like the amount of money it costs for the amount of potential headache that you can save. It's just worth it. So the rear brakes are just a little bit trickier. You do not want to push your piston straight back in. You're going to have to twist it as you go. There's a couple different ways to do that. And I'm going to go ahead and remove these. I think these are 13s or 12s right here. You got to take off first. Make sure your little pin is taken out of your Torx. This thing is taken out of your rotor. And then just go ahead and take off these 13s, and you're going to have some large, I think they're triple squares back there, and I'll show you what that is. So on the caliper bolt, you need an extra narrow 15mm on this side. I didn't have one, so I loosened it up a little bit, and I shoved my wrench in and started turning it and got it to fit, and then I'm just loosening it up that way. Alright, so this is where you want to make sure you do not push this piston right back in. You have to twist it and push it at the same time. There's some guys that say they use a screwdriver in there and they twist it with that. I'm going to show you guys another way real quick, and this is where this little tool really comes in handy. So what I do is I put the old brake pad in like this, and I put this little tool in, and I put very little tension on this. You see I can still move it and everything. There's just a little tiny bit of tension on there, and while there's tension on there, I'm actually going to grab the outside of this with a pair of pliers and twist it clockwise to push the piston in. You have to twist it as you push in. So sometimes you can just grab the outside of it with a pair of pliers and twist it and push it in at the same time, but sometimes they don't want to go in. So using this tool to kind of depress it slightly, do not push on it really hard, just push on it just very slightly and then turn it, and you'll see the caliper start to twist in. Alright, so you just grab the outside of it. Let's see if I can get a camera set. Alright, so we got you in the corner of the screen there. So I got this thing here tightened up just a little bit, and I'm just going to go ahead and give this thing a twist. So kind of a slow procedure sometimes, and you want to make sure you don't pinch that boot too much. You're going to give it a little turn, tighten that up just a little bit, and you'll see slowly but surely the piston will actually go back into the caliper. Twist it, tighten it up a little more, twist it in. Like I said, sometimes there's actually a special tool for this at the dealer. You know, if you want to spend the whatever it is. It's a little bit harder from this angle when I'm trying to show you guys how to do it. Sometimes it's easier with a pair of needle nose vice grips. Sometimes you can actually push it in as you're turning it with that. But the reason I'm showing you this way is because sometimes they're just really difficult to get to go in unless you have this tension with this thing on here. Some of them just go right in and some don't. So you put the tension on there just a little bit, twist it. Tension on here, twist it. I think you guys get the idea. And then try not to pinch that boot too badly, keep it in good shape. Alright, so I'll just go ahead and finish that up without you guys watching. And that's it for the caliper. The only other thing you have to take off now is the triple squares on here, which I'll show you real quick at the end of the video. We'll take the rotor off, and then you just reassemble as you took it apart. The hole that you need to take off back here is a triple square, 14 millimeter. So those are only available pretty much if you want to buy a socket set that includes that 14 millimeter. You know, you can buy them on Snap-on, of course, but if you want to order one, Amazon has them. So that's one place to get them. There's not many others. So like Sears doesn't have it, Harbor Freight doesn't have it. Not yet. Maybe they will by the time you watch this video. But don't be surprised if you have to order it and have to wait for that to come. So keep that in mind when you're doing your brakes. The one other thing you need to do prior to putting it back together is to, if you get your new rotors, you notice that they'll have a sticky coating on them typically, and it's called Cosmoline. And Cosmoline dissolves pretty easily with the brake cleaning spray. So clean your brake rotors off. You need to clean that off of your brake rotors. So usually I use a little bit of this brake spray. This is the Right Auto Parts brand. A paper towel. And wipe it off. Now, you don't necessarily have to take it off of between in the middles of your rotors. But like, you know, basically on the braking surface, you don't necessarily have to take it off of here or inside these holes. But be aware that when you do drive it, you might have a smell that'll pop up, you know, from the Cosmoline that's on your rotors, you know, already. So keep that in mind as well. So also when you put these together, be very careful if you have the sensor not to break the wires. Also real quick, if your brake pads don't come with the new shields, which again I would want to buy the higher quality brake pads that includes the shields. I'll show you what they are again. As you see here, there's actually a little piece of sheet metal on the back side of the brake pad, and you want to keep those shields on there, but sometimes some of the cheaper brake pads don't have that shield on them, and if they don't have that, then this product right here, CRC Disc Brake Quiet, what you would do is you would put some of this on every area it contacts the on the part of the brake pad that contacts the caliper, and what that does is it kind of puts a bit of a film between the two surfaces and kind of glues the brake. It doesn't really glue the brake pad in place, but it kind of like keeps the brake pad from vibrating. And this product actually works pretty good. In a pinch, I've used this for many years. I've been using this one, and I'd never really had any brake noise problems. But with these pads, I've been running these on my other car. I don't have anything on them, and you don't need it with this particular brand for this car, because I've never had a brake noise in that car. So anyway, that's it. I'm going to go ahead and drop off now. Just be careful putting it back together. Make sure you don't break these wires on these new brake pads. They are a bit fragile, so keep that in mind when you're putting it together. So, and that otherwise they just go back in the way they came apart. Talk to you in the next video. Please like, share, and subscribe.